Welcome back everyone to chapters 11 and 12, my Fire Emblem 7 Hector Hard Mode 0% Girls playthrough. I am Donovan1.
Hi, I'm Mekkah.
And we are just going to dive straight into things. Although before we begin, we have to do one thing, which is to create the Tactician. And this is the first instance in the series in which we have to create some sort of player-controlled avatar. Fortunately, there's not much that we have to edit. It's just our name, our birth month, and our gender. And the only really important one here is our birth month, which determines our affinity. This plays a role in the Tactician bonus, so there's two components to that. The first is that all player-controlled units will get a flat increase to their crit evade, equal to the number of Tactician stars that we earn. And we start out at 0, so that bonus doesn't exist. But throughout the course of the game, we gain Tactician stars just by playing it, and at the end of this playthrough, we'll end with 7. In more rank run oriented playthroughs, you might get more and end with about 10, but basically you get 1 point of crit evade for each Tactician star that you have. And for units that share the same affinity as Tactician, they also gain bonuses to their hit and their evade. So that includes units such as Marcus and Pent, who both have ice affinity, which is why we picked February for our birth month.
So the actual chapter is pretty straightforward, mostly because we only have 2 playable units, Matthew and Hector. And in order to win, all we have to do is kill the boss Wire in the bottom left corner using Hector's Wolfbeal. Matthew pretty much stands no chance against him. So movements are pretty straightforward. Hector does need to fight a couple of guys and actually dodge some hits though in order to survive. But as long as he does his job well, then he'll be able to fight Wire by turn 6 and win on enemy phase.
Yeah, so we do need to do a little bit of RNG abusing here because Hector has to dodge a few of the enemy attacks in the upcoming 2 turns. And this is pretty much unavoidable if you're taking top path to try to sneak around most of the enemies. If you take the bottom path, Hector has to fight everyone, and that's much slower. The other part of the chapter is to have Matthew steal the red gem from the thief, although I think I maybe misclicked and I stole lockpick instead. But don't worry, you know, money's not that important in FE7, and the lockpick still sells for a fair amount of money, so I think we'll be able to get away with that. But the whole point of that is because Hector is sneaking out of his hometown under his brother's nose, and he's not bringing anything with him, and so the red gem is for the game to give you at least some money to start out with. But anyway, that's chapter 11 finished in 6 turns, and let's move on to the actual gameplay.
Alright, Chapter 12, gameplay it is. Chapter 12 is a route map, and it is split in 2 sections basically, a top part and a bottom part. We have to route every single enemy in both parts, and the top part is going to be carried mostly by Hector and one of our new characters, Oswin. They are going to have to do a lot of work in this chapter, and unfortunately a lot of that work is with low hit rates because Hector and Oswin used to boast inaccurate weapon types in lances and axes, and a lot of their hits have to be done with 1-2 range weapons like the javelin and the hand axe. Matthew and Sarah are also in the top part, but we don't want them to do any work because Matthew is pretty bad at combat and Sarah is completely unable to do anything. So they have to pretty much hide in the corner for the entire map, and hopefully they don't see too much combat. The bottom part is much easier though, because that is where we have Marcus, one of the best characters in the franchise, able to one-round just about anything, except if you just carry Elowood around. That would kind of hamper his prowess.
But it's nothing to worry about because we have so many units that join us in the bottom part of the map that it doesn't really matter. And in fact, we do want to do kind of like the scrub Jacob strategy where we give him something to carry to have his skill and speed stats so that we can feed some kills and EXP to some other characters. And in particular for this chapter are Bartre and Lowen. Bartre because we have to get him to a level 5 warrior near the end of the game, so we just want to give him EXP whenever possible. And Lowen because we actually want to get into promotion by some later chapter, and that's why instead of having Marcus just steamroll through everything by doubling and when we're killing them with an iron sword, we gave him Elowood instead so that he can weaken everything such that they can get a kill. Now, one thing that we have to worry about is we have to be careful about weakening enemies in this chapter because all enemies in FE7 have some AI parameter that determines whether or not or at what percent HP they go seek healing, either whether or not they have a healing item or whether they try to retreat to a fort. And in this chapter, that threshold is 30%. So if we get any enemy down to below 30% HP and we don't kill them immediately, then they will instead go pacifist and run away from us and try to go to a fort if it's available. So that impacts our weapon selection a lot because it means, for example, that Oswin couldn't use the Iron Lance to attack the mercenary first. He had to use the Javelin because the Javelin is slightly weaker and just barely fails to put him below the 30% HP threshold. And it's also a reason why against all these super weak Pegasus Knights, Hector is not obliterating them with the Wolf Bale. He has to use his hand axe because the Wolf Bale is much stronger than the hand axe and will put them at too low of HP. The Pegasus Knights in particular are someone that you have to be worried about because they fly, so if you weaken them too much, they fly away to a place where you can't even attack them, and then that just needlessly prolongs the chapter by a long time.
This enemy phase is really the prime example of why this chapter can be so annoying to play, because Hector has to land so many hand axe hits on enemies. The most notorious enemy in this chapter for me is always the hand axe brigands that found one of the very few tiles that doesn't have a terrain bonus for him to attack Hector from. Normally it's pretty hard to make sure he doesn't attack you from a forest tile or even a mountain, but thankfully we managed to avoid that. Now in order to kill the boss, Hector and Oswin are too far away and they would have to wade through a bunch of forests to get to him. The best way to tackle the boss for us is to have Marcus move towards him at almost full move every single turn. This will make the boss move down instead of left towards Hector and Oswin. And Marcus is the only person in this chapter capable of one-rounding the boss anyway. So having him do that with like an Iron Axe or a Silver Lance is the best way to go. We have visited the Secret Book village with Rebecca. Most players like to sell that Secret Book and use it to buy some iron weapons in this chapter, but we don't need the money that much, and we actually are going to set up a trade chain to make sure that Marcus gets that Secret Book, because we want to give that to him anyway since he sees the most combat out of any unit by far, and this will get us the most extra hit bonus over the course of the whole playthrough.
Yeah, I think people like to meme on Secret Books as being a terrible stat booster, and they are, especially relative to things that boost strength or speed or defense or HP. But the +4 hit and the +1 crit that you get from using a Secret Book definitely matter a lot over the course of a playthrough, especially if you're fighting as much as Marcus does. And speaking of fighting, this is like the one instance in the chapter in which we had Sarah and Matthew exposed to combat, and that was intentional just so that we could spread out the enemies and draw them back a little bit, and also have Matthew just do a little bit more damage to help finish off Pegasus Knight. It also sets up an easy heal for Sarah, otherwise she just wouldn't do anything at all in this chapter. We do use Secret Book on Marcus just for the extra boost in hit rate because he's at weapon triangle disadvantage with the Silver Lance. It is possible to 3-turn this chapter in a gross playthrough by rigging a Wolf Bale critical from a +2 strength Hector on to the boss, but instead we're going to 4-turn with Marcus. So see you next time.
See ya.